This is Thomas Cameron with McKesson. Kate, Rosa, and I from Alithia are going to be presenting to you today about McKesson's transformation to driver-based forecasting, going from spreadsheets to strategic insights. We're going to start off with an introduction, talk about why we changed from Excel to driver-based forecasting, how we laid the foundation from a strategy perspective as well as with our stakeholders, how we made it real with our forecasting transformation, what we did to enable this transformation, the impact and the outcomes from the transformation, and then lessons learned, advised, and what's next on our roadmap. As I mentioned, I'm Thomas Cameron. I am a senior director at McKesson over our enterprise financial solutions. I've spent more than 17 years with Oracle EPM's products. I've been at McKesson for over 5 years now. Prior to McKesson, I spent over 12 years in consulting, focused on finance transformation with different technology solutions. For those of you that aren't familiar with McKesson, we are a diversified healthcare leader that focuses on the patient. We're best known for distributing about a third of all pharmaceutical drugs in North America. But we do a number of other things where we help patients get access to their medicine, making sure that they can afford them and they don't forget about their prescriptions that are needed. We also treat over 15% of all new cancer patients at our oncology practices. One highlight I'd like to call out is that we did receive Oracle's Finance Innovation Award in 2025. This is due to our work with the new Oracle EPM Cloud products, where we're using a lot of the new functionality, such as the predictive forecasting, the narrative reporting, commentary capabilities, and other functionality across our Oracle EPM Cloud environment. Now I'll turn it over to Kate from Alithia.
Hi, my name is Kate Rosa. I am a senior principal consultant with Alithia. I have been working with Oracle products for about 13 years now. 10 of those were spent in industry as a financial systems manager, and then the last 3 have been in consulting. This mix of both internal and external experience gives me a unique perspective when leading these financial transformation projects. I've sat on the client side. I understand the expectations, the common pitfalls, and what success looks like from both the business and technical lenses. And that has really helped me on the consulting side, leading these implementations and delivering results. With that, I will turn it back over to Thomas for why change.
Thanks, Kate. So why change? Why go from Excel to driver-based forecasting? And I think that's a very easy thing to understand and explain. At McKesson, we're on a digital finance transformation journey, aiming to unlock better insights with the data. We have tons of finance data, but sometimes we have trouble accessing the details of that data and really spending time with the analytics and the insights needed to leverage that finance data. We're also looking to use technology capabilities to automate a lot of our processes. And then from our FP&A modernization efforts, it's a combination of both process change as well as leveraging technology. So looking to simplify our processes, but also to leverage technology to automate some of those processes and then drive additional insights and make our forecast process easier on our FP&A analysts and teams.
Right. So where did we begin? Well, we began where most forecasts begin, which is in Excel. As you can see in the diagram, there are 3 distinct business functions and groups, all utilizing their own Excel models that contributed to a consolidated forecast that was ultimately housed in a reporting queue. Let's talk about some of the pain points that are happening because of this starting state. First, we have the usual suspects in Excel. Version control issues, formula errors, risk of transference errors, and then multiple versions of the same document floating around. But the challenges go deeper. Creating a detailed bottoms-up forecast for every product, every segment, distribution channel can be incredibly time-consuming. And then layer on the need to accurately show monthly seasonality at that level of granularity is difficult in any tool, let alone spreadsheets. Yet, in many times of uncertainty, think COVID, which obviously deeply impacted McKesson, that level of detail is exactly what was needed for leadership to navigate that time. Since each group was managing their own Excel files independently, downstream teams had little to no visibility into how or why forecast decisions were being made by others. So let's walk through an example. The sales team changes the forecast for a product that was previously 90% shipped through third party services, and they're changing it. So now it is only 50% shipped through third party services. That change is going to ripple across multiple groups. Do we need more warehouse staff? Do we have the physical capacity to actually store that extra inventory? Does this impact our profit margins? Is this a temporary shift because of outside factors, or is this part of a larger strategic move? Without visibility, those downstream impacts can be missed or mistreated. So, how do we solve this? We solve this with both technology and business process redesign with the right support system. By moving the forecast process out of Excel and into Oracle Planning, we immediately resolve some low-hanging fruit. No more version control issues, you don't have formula errors, and the transference risk is gone because it's all happening within one system. The teams, instead of manually entering in data, they're being guided by pre-built forms, ensuring that they input at the correct intersections. In most cases, they only needed to make high-level assumptions, and the system handled the allocation down to base-level details. This type of guidance and business process of make the highest common assumption you can make and let that get pushed down and then go in and make your one-off adjustments became the new standard that we were trying to manage to. And most importantly, the rationale behind these forecast numbers became visible. Using the data source dimension, we could separate what portion of a number is business as usual. Then what's the assumed growth on top of that? And then what are the new initiatives, business decisions or rationale that are contributing to these numbers that usually do not have historical data, so would not be captured in the prior two segments. Everyone being able to see that breakdown created transparency that had not been there previously and really was a game changer for the forecasters and for cross-team collaboration and for leadership. There, I'll turn it back over to Thomas.
So we had to start by laying the foundation of the strategy and with our stakeholders. So the case for change is pretty straightforward in what you see in most companies where a lot of Excel is used for the forecasting process. There's a lot of manual processes, non-standard when you've got a variety of different business units that you have to consolidate across McKesson. There's a lot of time spent on immaterial items, aggregating data, but not focused on the business drivers and focusing on the reviewing the forecast to see if there's any insights you can glean there. So our steps to deliver included first by defining what are our drivers for our businesses, and then defining these with driver trees and data dictionaries for these drivers. And then we also tested out our drivers statistically to figure out if they were actually driving the business and there was a correlation there and which ones were the most highly correlated to our business. Then we started looking at the technical solution with the forecast process and deploying a 3-tier forecasting process within the technology solution. So establishing a baseline and then applying the drivers on top of it, and then adding any business initiatives such as acquiring new businesses or divesting or adding new products to the mix. And then from there, you review the forecast, adjust, enhance the models as you learn more, as drivers change to the business. The benefits we're looking for is one, to simplify the process. So there were a number of handoffs going back and forth between the FP&A teams and the business partners. Also, it was a lot of effort in just establishing the baseline numbers. And so really simplifying the process, improving the efficiencies there. And that will help us increase the speed. And then the accuracy also, we're spending a lot of time on immaterial items that don't draw a lot of value or really change the overall forecast. That way we can spend more time with our business partners to refine the drivers and focus on what's coming for the business, what additional value add activities can we take on to increase the margins for our business. So we needed to get stakeholders on board. The benefit that we had is our CFO was sponsoring this initiative, pushing that down through other CFOs within our different business units and their FP&A teams. So we identified the pain points across the FP&A teams. Even at different business units, we found very common pain points across the processes. Tied the project goals to the strategic objectives, which were speed and insight and trust in the forecast. So it wasn't just a matter of making our forecast, putting our forecast in a technology solution and making it faster, but also making sure it was accurate and it provided additional insights, what drivers, how much the drivers were impacting our business. Cross-functional collaboration across our IT group, FP&A, and then our business leaders. We held multiple sessions across the different stakeholder groups, shared regular updates as we went through the projects as it impacted different stakeholder groups. There were times that we brought the business partners in or the IT teams in a little bit differently because there were heavier impacts to them. Our implementation journey here would show you that it did last over a couple of years. As I mentioned, we started with getting executive alignment on the program with our finance leaders and defining those driver trees. So what are the key drivers for each of our businesses and statistically testing those. Once we had defined the key drivers, then we started into our technology design and we started design sessions for our McKesson Medical Surgical Business Unit back in FY24. We started with our sales model, so focusing just on the sales side of the business. What are the drivers? Building in that 3-tier. We wanted to show success with a foundational model for sales, and then we rolled that out to additional parts of the business. So we started in FY25 with our sales group, and as we were finishing up our sales go live, then we started with our buy side design. So we have the sales and the buy side, which impact the overall margin. Work through, I'll tell you, one of the best things that we heard as we went through the buy side, throughout the sales, we gained experience and knowledge on the best ways to work with the business and roll out this technology solution. Our buy side solution actually went live 1 month early. The buy side was so happy with the new solution. It took their process down from setting a baseline, taking 3 days to pull all their data together and have a baseline to start with, down to just a couple of hours within the new technology solution. And so they were able to go through their UAT and their parallel testing and felt very confident to go live a month early than what we had planned. After we went live with the buy side solution, then we focused on our ops and our core planning solution. So the ops piece of the business from, distribution, warehouses, freight, and logistics, and then our core plan being our full P&L, so the OpEx elements. We felt there's more opportunity in the gross margin side of the business from an FP&A perspective. That's the reason we started with that part. There was a lot more value to be gained there, whereas the OpEx side of the business is more standard as far as how you forecast. And so we left that solution towards the end. That way we could just focus our efforts on the higher value and insights there. And we have now gone live with all of the medical surgical FP&A solution, which includes our sales, our buy side, our ops, and then our OpEx from a full P&L and then balance sheet forecasting perspective.
All right, so now we'll talk about how we completed this transformation. Our approach was grounded in 4 core principles. Start small, iterate often, expand progressively, validate in parallel. So as Thomas mentioned, we began by designing for one business unit, rolled it out for one group of it at a time with each its own cycle of build, test, parallel run, and go live. Throughout the build, we held weekly conference room pilots. This allowed users to see how the design was translating into a working application. If something didn't match their expectations, no problem. We documented the change and came back the next week with an updated solution. After functionality testing, we ran a parallel period, comparing outputs in order to build trust, catch any bugs, and ensure accuracy. While one group was in parallel, we did begin building for the next, continuously applying the lessons that we learned and accelerating our momentum through this project. From a technical standpoint, we followed a crawl, walk, run approach shown here. In the crawl phases, we have hybrid BSO as our key enabler. It allowed us to use a single cube for both data entry and reporting. This avoided early restrictions tied to the final ASO reporting cube. We were able to make dimensionality decisions late in the project because we were able to use the same cube for both data entry, calculations, and reporting early on. The next phase, Groovy scripting. So with Groovy, we could isolate only the change cells and recalculate just the impacted forecast lines and all of the downstream calculations at any given point. This meant on our baseline form, we would recalculate the baseline, and then we would recalculate growth, seasonality, margins, distribution split, and sales adjustments on save, but only for the items that were changed, which kept the system performant. It also enabled users to input at a parent level cell and push the assumptions down to level 0 with a single click. This maintained a high level forecast view that was always accurate. There was no waiting for batch calcs or scheduled pushes because everything was able to calculate in real time. So again, this meant fast save times, accurate numbers, a responsive forecasting environment. And while we progress quickly through the crawl and walk phases, the run phase is still ongoing. We're currently working with the IPM Auto Predict and other various modules within there, running it in parallel to the traditional forecast to assess where machine generated forecasts can outperform the human ones. And with that, we'll give you a kind of preview of how that's going. So what we're looking at on this slide are forecasts across both seasonal and non-seasonal products in a couple of markets. So if we look here, you can see in the green highlighted variance column, we have the human forecast was off by about 4 million, while IPM predictions was off by only 200,000. In that case, IPM clearly won, but if that was not always the case. For non-seasonal product 3, both forecasts were significantly off, but the human forecast was closer. What we're trying to do with this analysis is identify the ideal candidates for automation. We're identifying segments where IPM could take over. This way, we can free up the analysts and planners' hours for those products that are more complex or need more strategic, high-touch forecasting. The goal is never to, completely do everything via the computer. There's always going to be a need for layering in business logic. There's just context that machines can't have. And we want to free up time for our users to focus on those value add areas and focus on the analysis piece of it. So work smarter, not harder. Before I wrap up the how, I do want to zoom out for a moment. On the left side of the slide, you can see how the individual groups we've been talking about now come together to form a single consolidated forecast. Starting with sales, each group builds on data from the previous one, creating continuity and clarity across the process. On the right, we highlight that this success was not driven by the planning product alone. It is part of a broader Oracle ecosystem. We have EDMCS streamlining the hierarchy management and integration across all of these systems. We have FCCS serving as the record for consolidated financials that we ingest for OpEx and balance sheet. Planning supported not just this project, but others across the organization. Lastly, we have narrative reporting, and everyone hopefully remembers, as Thomas spoke about at the beginning of this presentation, McKesson's recent Financial Innovation Award in narrative. The commentary functionality that they're using is pretty advanced already, and now we have the Gen AI functionality that McKesson is a prime candidate to take advantage of, and we have a whole new world of storytelling opportunities opening up with that. With that, I will turn it back over to Thomas.
So I wanted to walk through some of the impacts and outcomes that we found within our medical surgical business and the efforts that we did there. Our aim of this was to create capacity from an efficiency perspective on the forecast, as well as become more accurate on the forecast. You'll see in the left pie chart, it's showing that we spent about 70% of our time just developing the baseline for our upcoming forecast and then consolidating the data and creating the reports for our forecast. Our aim was to take away the time that we spent just developing the baseline, allow the system to do that, spend more time on the assumptions and the key drivers, and then more time reviewing the forecast with our stakeholders and with our finance leaders to refine it for more accuracy of the forecast. So you'll see a comparison here of the current state where our FP&A teams are working hard every month just to put together the forecast and reporting for finance leadership. And then the future state, where we are today, where we spend only about 5% of our time with the baseline. That is all done via the new technology solution that we've developed. And then only about 5% of our time developing and creating reports. We have most of the reports automated, batch reporting gets sent out by email to our leadership teams on a regular basis with the forecasted numbers. So now we're able to spend 50% of our time updating assumptions. So focusing on the key drivers, using the new technology solution to call out what portion of the forecast was impacted by each driver, by seasonality, by different initiatives that we may have, and then spend 40% of our time there reviewing the forecast with stakeholders. And that review with stakeholders includes our business partners as well as our FP&A and finance leaders. So as I mentioned, some of the critical benefits that we were able to unlock include speed of decision making. So we don't have to wait days just to have the baselines in place. If we see anything that causes us questions, then we're able to react and meet with either our finance leaders or business partners to get more information there. We're spending a lot more time with our business partners reviewing the forecast than we ever have before. We have more transparency into what is driving the forecasted numbers. As I mentioned, we're able to see which drivers are causing what percentage of change or what dollar value of change to our forecast, what impacts from a seasonality perspective, what impacts we have from different initiatives that we have layered on. And having all this additional insight and time to spend with our business partners and finance leaders reviewing the forecast gives us improved accuracy that we've seen over the last couple of months. So, what are the lessons learned and advice that I can provide to you? And then also, what's next on our roadmap for finance transformation? Because it does not stop once you complete a project, it is ongoing, as most of you know. Generally, you want to strive for improvement, not perfection. If you get bogged down in trying to solve everything, you may not go live with anything. And so, how can we improve? And then let's continue to iterate and enhance on that improvement. It does take time to change, and it really takes time at the analyst levels that are having to ask or answer questions from either their FP&A leaders or their business partners, and they know they've gotten a specific question in the past that they've had to be prepared for, and they're used to having the data look a certain way in order to be able to answer these questions. So it's important to understand the change management efforts and work with your FP&A analysts and teams on the communications of why we're changing and what we're changing. Everything does not go perfectly the first time, so there are going to be some failures and shortcomings, but we work through them and we find a way forward on those. It was very important that we had active leadership updates. So to our CFOs, to our, FP&A leaders, anything that we needed to escalate from a risk perspective of where we were going too granular from a level of detail or overcomplicating a process, we would escalate those to our leaders and get them to weigh in so that we could manage that change management back down through the project teams and the different FP&A teams to keep them on track, keep them understanding what the objectives of the solution and the transformation are. So it's important to keep them engaged throughout the program. From a technical perspective, data validation, that takes time. So always plan for time to make sure your data is validated, because if you don't provide good numbers to finance, they won't trust any solution that you put out there. And with the technology enhancements, we're able to provide visibility into levels that most of our business hadn't been able to see before because they're spending so much time just consolidating the data in their spreadsheets. Well, now they have access to even more data. And so a lot of those things that were historically impossible are now possible. The ease to come up with predictive forecasts just to get those out of a system versus having to build some very complex technical solution to try and enable something we would call predictive in the past is much easier today. And so a lot of change on the technology front. And from an Oracle EPM Cloud perspective, they're constantly coming out with new functionality around AI, whether it's just the insights, whether it's predictive forecasting. Now we have the multivariate predictive forecasting, also from the agentic AI and generative AI components that they're making possible in the Oracle EPM Cloud today. So the driver-based forecasting solution that we developed here for our MedSurg business unit, it's just the first step in our journey of finance modernization. We're looking to establish an enterprise-wide consistent method to forecasting and focus on the drivers of our business. In the long term, we want to get to predictive forecasting. As Kate mentioned, we've already started to pilot some of those, and we found areas of the business that work really well from a predictive forecasting solution. There's other areas of the business that don't correlate as quickly to the predictive forecasting. But that is our future vision. It'll allow our FP&A teams more time to spend reviewing the data versus actually creating the forecasts themselves, but working with our business and developing plans and able to enhance our business's ability to meet consumer needs and demands.
All right, so looking ahead, this is the vision for the future Oracle environment at MMS. In the top row in light blue, you'll see the core plan and margin planning, which are complete, but there's certainly more to come. As we continue rolling out the remaining components, we're unlocking even more clearer insights into segment profitability, a more intuitive and driver-based labor model, and ultimately smarter, faster, and more aligned long-range planning. We've already seen some real benefits, and we're excited to keep pushing forward. With that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time today. It has been a privilege to share this journey and some of the tangible outcomes that we've seen. I hope this leaves you with inspiration, not just about what the tools can do, but what's possible when technology and thoughtful business process design come together. Thank you very much.